think he's got to be really careful. He sounds too cheerful, having had a real drubbing in two very different parts of the country. A little bit of humility is what is really needed in this country at the moment from all of our political leaders. And this kind of rubbing people's nose in it, I think that will annoy people in Yorkshire and it'll annoy people in the West Country. And he's probably just cost himself serious numbers of votes in those parts of the country.
Continue to focus on the fallout of those three by-elections, two huge losses for the Conservatives, but some relief as they held Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Let's dissect this now with Baroness Nicky Morgan, former Education Secretary, and Jack McConnell, former First Minister of Scotland and former leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good to speak to you both. Wherever you're listening to us, you can text us now, join in the conversation. You can text us 87222. Start your message with the word Times. You can tweet us at Times Radio and you can email studio@times.radio. Baroness Morgan, let's begin by looking at, some people would say a mixed bag. Other people would say, actually, this has been a terrible night for the Conservative Party with a slight bit of relief when we're talking about Uxbridge and South Ruislip. What's your assessment?
My assessment is I think the results weren't unexpected, obviously not what the party would want. And as you say, I think the result in Uxbridge was a delightful surprise. And I think our candidate there, Steve Tuckwell, has said that he was surprised. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it. I guess if I were a candidate facing the next general election, I think the lesson I would take from this is that clearly as Conservatives, lots more to do to meet the Prime Minister's 5 pledges. But also, it just shows the power of a local issue. And firstly, I think if I was Sadiq Khan, I'd be worried. But secondly, if you can find that local issue and something that really just crystallises in people's minds, then actually you can buck the trend and you can win when it's completely, your chances of almost being completely written off.
Do you think you can even do that in a general election?
Possibly, yes, if it's a really, really local issue or something that's perhaps particularly affecting a particular, city part of the country. It's got to be quite a concentrated issue for a concentrated group of seats or a particular seat. But yes, I think that is still possible in a general election. Difficult, unusual. But I suspect a lot of my former colleagues will now be thinking over the summer, what is it that we can find that actually is going to really motivate our voters not to change their minds and follow the Uxbridge example? I think the other lesson from it as well is, and people said this on the doorsteps, I think a lot of people turned up, particularly the Labour activists turned up in Uxbridge, expecting everybody to say they didn't like their former MP and they, were disappointed. And I don't think they found that, actually. So what your predecessor has done does also matter. And of course, with David Warburton and Somerton and Froome, and then Nigel Adams having resigned to Selby and Ainsley, I think that does cast a shadow over the campaigns too.
Jack McConnell, I want to bring you in on what was in some ways a successful night for Labour, but also a little bit frustrating. How would you sum it up?
Actually, I think it's probably a good night for Labour, but for different reasons than others might suggest. I think it's in some ways quite good to have a result that makes sure there is no complacency. It's obviously a fantastic result in Selby and a real signal that things have changed. You can't imagine Labour even coming second in that seat in a by-election under either Ed Miliband or Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. So, I think we can see now the real difference that Keir Starmer has made and that Labour is now electable again. But the other results, I think, are a good wake-up call just to keep everybody on their toes. And I quite liked Angela Rayner's tone there in her interview earlier in your programme, with a little bit of humility, because I think that's necessary after a by-election. There's far too much celebration after by-elections. You get it from the Lib Dems all the time. This kind of, we're now going to change the world on the basis of one result that's exactly the same as has happened down through the decades in by-elections. And I think all parties need to realise that politics is volatile just now. They need to be responsive to voters' concerns, as in the ULEZ example, but they also need to recognise the big trend, which is that people are fed up and want change.
Well, let's have a little listen to the Prime Minister, who's been speaking in the last 20 minutes or so. He's on a visit to Uxbridge and South Ruislip, the constituency that the Conservatives held. The Conservative MP there is now Steve Tuckwell, who has held that seat. Here is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Westminster's been acting like the next election's a done deal. The Labour Party's been acting like it's a done deal. The people of Uxbridge just told all of them that it's not. Now, no one expected us to win here, but Steve's victory demonstrates that when confronted with the actual reality of the Labour Party, when there's an actual choice on a matter of substance at stake, people vote Conservative.
Prime Minister, you had two bruising defeats last night, and yes, a narrow win here, but this campaign, we barely mentioned you or your 5 priorities. It's not really a cause for celebration, is it?
Well, I just first of all want to say a massive thank you to all our candidates and hard-working activists. They've been doing a brilliant job over the past few weeks. And look, by-elections, mid-term for an incumbent government are always difficult. They rarely win them. The message I take away is that we've got to double down, stick to our plan and deliver for people. That's what I heard when I was out on the doorsteps, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to work incredibly hard, deliver on our 5 priorities and earn people's trust for the next election.
So the soundbite of the morning then, not a done deal, the next general election. Jack McConnell, do you agree?
Yes, this is just what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I think he's got to be really careful. You know, he sounds too cheerful, having had a real drubbing in 2 very different parts of the country. A little bit of humility is what is really needed in this country at the moment from all of our political leaders. And this kind of rubbing people's nose in it, I think that will annoy people in Yorkshire and it'll annoy people in the West Country. And he's probably just cost himself, serious numbers of votes in those parts of the country. I did like Angela Rayner's tone. I mean, Angela can be, a Marmite politician to some people, but that tone earlier on where Labour were saying, yeah, we've had a good night, it's a good result, it's fitting with the national trend, but we're going to learn some lessons from this. That's exactly the tone that politicians should be striking in this country at the moment when there's so little trust and so much disenchantment.
We'll bring you back in a second, Nikki, but since Jack's mentioned Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, who was on breakfast earlier, let's have a little listen and see if you agree about the tone.
I think, to be honest, if you look at where we were in 2019 as a political party after that general election, and if you'd have said that, today I'd be talking to you about winning Selby in a by-election and overturning a 20,000 majority for the Conservatives, you'd have laughed me out of the studio. So I think it shows actually that we've changed the Labour Party. The people are listening to us now. It's up to us to put a credible alternative plan at a general election, which we've been building on, and it's showing that people are turning away from the Conservatives because they've crashed the economy and people's energy bills, their mortgages, their rents, their food prices, everything's going up, and they're not seeing any fruits of their labour of what they've been doing in 13 years. And our public services have been running to the ground. I mean, people just feel like it's managed decline and they want change.
Nikki Morgan, how would you compare then? It's quite an interesting theme actually. The 2 tones that we've just heard from Rishi Sunak a moment ago, from Angela Rayner there, that Jack's been reflecting on. What would you say?
Say that I think that look, when you're asked these things as a leader of a party, you have to be upbeat. I mean, that's one of the things about political interviews and reporting and all the rest of it. And actually, as you said, Callum, the headline from the Rishi Sunak interview is "General Election not a done deal," and I think inevitably he's going to point to the victory last night, and not. There will be plenty of behind the scenes conversations going on about what happened in the 2 other by-elections. And I think actually what the common theme is from both Angela Rayner and Rishi Sunak is on both sides, they're saying, let's double down, let's carry on doing what we were doing. So the 5 pledges for the Conservatives and for Rishi Sunak, and talking about why they think that they've got to offer a credible alternative is Angela Rayner's phrase today. And so in a way it's more of the same. I think everyone's ready for a summer break from politics, and then we'll come back for a pretty frenetic, I think, final 12 months. I think the election will be next autumn, but who knows?
Some speculation overnight that it might be next November, reports Bloomberg. I'm just thinking as well as we talk about this, it can't take much to change the minds of 495 people, which is the margin of victory here for the Conservatives in Uxbridge. I mean, what's the maths on that, Jack? That's got to be what, 50,000 leaflets or something? I don't know, it can't be loads.
I mean, I think my impression, I don't know an awful lot about the ULEZ thing, but my impression of what's happened there is that you really do have to think through the implementation of controversial policies. It's not to say you shouldn't tackle them, big issues, but at the same time, you have to think through the implementation. And when we When we passed the ban on smoking in public places in Scotland in 2005, it was massively controversial. The country was split down the middle on it. But by the time the law came in 15 months later, we had persuaded and resourced the change, and right across the whole country, people supported it. So I think there's lessons to be learned here about implementation, and hopefully Sadiq will be listening.